Hi guys. Um, I've been working on this idea for a while. I wanted to do a whole expose on the question words in the Germanic languages. So the question words in the Germanic languages are all quite similar. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go over where they came from, what their purpose was, and how we got to where we are today, based on where everything started. So just a bit of background. All the Germanic languages are part of what's called the Indo-European group of languages. So English, German, Dutch, Afrikaans, Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, Icelandic, Faroese, Luxembourgish, there's a bunch of other ones as well. Those are all Germanic languages. And the Germanic languages are part of the Indo-European group, as are the Romance languages, which are Italian, Portuguese, French, Romanian, Romance, and so on and so on. And the Slavic languages are also Indo-European languages. So Russian, Czech, Polish, Serbian, those are all Slavic languages. And the Celtic languages are also Indo-European. So Irish Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic, Manx, Breton, or Breton, however you pronounce it, those are also Indo-European languages. So Indo-European is actually the world's largest language family. About half the world speaks Indo-European language natively. So that means, and there's also languages in Middle East and also languages in north of India that are Indo-European, like Hindi, and in Middle East languages like Persian or Farsi are Indo-European. So it's a huge language family. But I'm specifically going to be talking about the Germanic languages. So English, so just as a bit more background about the Germanic languages. The Germanic languages are split into three groups, the West Germanic, East Germanic, and North Germanic. West Germanic are originated in kind of North Germany, modern-day Netherlands area. So the West Germanic languages are English, Frisian, German, Dutch, Afrikaans, and there's a few others like Low German. East Germanic were all the Gothic languages, so Gothic, Burgundian, things like that. We don't have a lot of information about the East Germanic languages because they died out, because those people were kind of elite in their areas, like there were Goths in Italy, but they didn't really hold on for too long. So East Germanic died out, and the third group of Germanic languages is the North Germanic languages. So those are all descended from the language of the people in Scandinavia. So that includes the groups like the Vikings. And their language was generally called Old Norse. So Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, Icelandic, and Faroese, those are all North Germanic. And so all the North Germanic languages are closer to each other than there are to languages in the West Germanic group. And obviously the West Germanic and vice versa. So the languages in the West Germanic group are also quite similar to each other. So English specifically, and there's one more grouping. So if you look at the West Germanic languages themselves, you've got further subgroups. So in West Germanic, we've got the North Sea Germanic languages, which are English, Scots. Scots is spoken in Scotland, and Frisian. So and Low German. So Low German was and is spoken in the north of Germany. So English, Frisian, Scots, and Low German are what's called North Sea Germanic. And so there's that group. There's the Dutch, Flemish, and Afrikaans subgroup of West Germanic, and then there is what's called High German, which developed from a dialect in the middle of Germany, and then also Luxembourgish and Swiss German is part of this third group of West Germanic. So if you look at the Germanic languages, especially the group that English is in, the smaller subgroup, you'll see a lot of similarities between English, Scots, and Frisian. So the word for dream in Frisian is written exactly the same as the English word for dream. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, but it's very similar. And the word door in Frisian is door, and green is also green. So where did the question words come from? So what linguists have done is linguists have used a thing called comparative reconstruction. Comparative means you look at the different languages, and then you try to work out if these are all the languages that we have, and they have all these forms, where may these forms have come from. So it's kind of like looking at all the family members and try to work out what the parents would have looked like. So that's what they've done with Proto-Germanic. And so they've managed to reconstruct a lot of forms in Proto-Germanic, and if you look at those forms, you will see that a lot of the same kind of words come from. So the form in Proto-Germanic was used in similar places, like the English word for what. So the Proto-Germanic word for what was used in English, was used in German, was used in Dutch, was used in basically all of them. And so that word hasn't changed that much. These kind of fundamental words haven't changed that much. So why don't we get into it? So the problem that I have, and the reason I'm doing this on my phone, is because my laptop is really bad. It's really old, and I need to get an upgrade. But I thought I'm not going to delay this video any longer, because I would like to get this out there. So I'm just going to be flipping the camera and pointing my phone at my screen so I can show you what I'm doing. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so we have here, so the English word what comes from, oh yes, this is another thing. What they did is they used all the written forms of the language that we have. So the oldest form of English is Old English, and they are also known as Anglo-Saxon, because English is derived from a language spoken by the Saxons that moved from the Germany about area, that moved to England, and you see the oldest form of German is Old High German. It's called High German because it's spoken in the high elevations, as opposed to Low German, which is closer to English. And then we have Old Dutch, and then we also have Old Saxon, which gave us Low German. So if we look here, what comes from Old English what, and that's why we got the WH in English, because for a long time it was written HW, and the HW is a H sound. So in some dialects of English nowadays, you'll still hear people say what, and that's because there was an H in the beginning. But then the French came along and they were like, we don't like this HW, we're going to write it a WH, because there's a WH, there's a SH, there's a TH, there's a CH. So like, we're going to write it WH. But no one else does that. But it's not actually a difference in pronunciation. It's just how they decide to write it. So the word what comes from Old English what, which you will hear at the very beginning of Beowulf. An interesting thing about that is that it was used in a different way than we use it now. In the very beginning of Beowulf, they will say what, which actually is like a call to attention. So it means something like listen. So what, so what comes from Old English what. So the H is pronounced h in Proto-Germanic. So this is what. So what actually comes from is a version of the word was in Proto-Germanic. So the word was there it is. Was the Proto-Germanic word for what. But now what happened is that we've got different cases. So if you don't know, the cases are nominative, accusative, dative, genitive, and what those means is those just tell you what role something is playing in a sentence. So the nominative is when something's the subject. So if you say something like he is a man, then he is the subject. Now if you want to ask what something is, then that will take the nominative form because it's talking about the subject of the sentence. So what is the nominative of was. What is the nominative of was, and or maybe I can go a bit closer so you can see a bit better. So was is the base form, and then it gets declined. Declined means you change it. So was becomes what. Now the word who or who it comes from Old English hua, and that comes from that's also a form of the word was. The word where comes from Old English where. So that the AE, like there, is the A sound. So what, wha, where. And that comes from Proto-Germanic whar. Now this is very interesting. This is not part of the declension scheme of the declension scheme is the types of all the different forms you get of a word. So you have was, what, and so on and so on. But whar is a special thing in Proto-Germanic. When you added r to whar, you get, when you added r to was, you get whar. Now that is actually it creates adverbs indicating textual location from normal stems. So now what that means is that we've got this word was. When you added r, you get whar. Now why that's interesting, so that's basically what place. So r indicates some kind of location, and then you have was. So whar is was plus r. So that's basically what place. So where actually means what place. But now what's very interesting about that is that also this r also gives us the words here and there. The word here is derived from Proto-Germanic he's plus r, which became here, and eventually here, or in my actually here, because I don't have r's at the end. So here, and the word he's in Proto-Germanic means this. So here in means this place, because you've got the r. So His means this, and plus R you get here, that means this place, because you're talking about a place when you add the R. And there comes from thar. Thar is that. So, and that's also where we get the word the and the and that and so on. Now the word there comes from thar. So you have thar plus R is that place. And that place gives us an, so there, the word there comes from thar, which basically means that place. So when I discovered that, I found that very interesting. Okay, now on to the next one. We have the word why. So the word why comes from Old English hui, which is comes from Proto-Germanic hui. Now this is the instrumental case of the word was. Now the instrumental means when you work with something. So so you're asking what am I using this with? So if you do something like with a spade, you're using the instrumental case. So was in the instrumental becomes hui, and then in Old English the h became a h, so hui, and then later on the e became an I, so hui became y, and you can see there that the hu eventually became a w. There's still some accents where you will have a y, but most accents just have a w. The word when comes from Old English when, so there's two ends, and that comes from Proto-Germanic Juan. How comes from Old English who, from Proto-Germanic huo. So also, by the way, this little star here, that means this is a reconstructed form. We don't have any Proto-Germanic written down. That's why it's called proto. Proto means that it's a reconstructed language. It's also known as a proto-language. So this is the form that linguists think might have been used, but this is our best guess of what form the earliest Germanic peoples were using when they were actually using the language. And then also an interesting thing about this U sound, the U sound became an ow sound later on. So English, why English doesn't sound like all the other Germanic languages is because it went through a huge thing called the Great Vowel Shift. The hu here became a how. Same that hus became house and moose became mouse. So also the reason why mouse becomes mice is because you have who, so let's just type here, we have moose, and then that then became mouse, and so the u became an owl. But in plural, the plural was quite regular. The plural was moosey. But over time, the E made people pronounce the U differently. And so it became, over time, meesy. And over time, the E just fell out. So you have moose and plural meese. And as we know, where is it here? Hui, that E became an I. Same with here. Moose becomes mouse. Meese becomes mice. So that's an interesting thing that we can discover if we look at that specifically. Now, which comes from Old English whilk. And here's another interesting tidbit. This comes from Proto-Germanic huilikas. Huilikas. So the little line over the I is a long vowel. So huilikas, that, so hui, it's a form of was, which means what, and likas became by itself became the English word like. So you can see it looks similar. That means what kind or like what, and that's derived from was. So which actually means what kind of thing. So which plant, which person, which book. So what kind, is it like what? And last thing is the word weather. So this comes from Old English "huather," and this comes from Proto-Germanic "huatheras" or "huatheros." But what's interesting about this is that if we want to know what this thera, so we know what hua, because we've seen that earlier, that means what. What is this theras, theros, with the is an or. Where does the theros come from? And that actually comes from Proto-Indo-European. So again, with the Proto-Germanic, Proto is the proto-language spoken by the Germanic people. Proto-Indo-European is the proto-language spoken by the very initial Indo-European people that gave us the Slavic people, the Celtic people, the Germanic people. So this comes from Proto-Indo-European, quos plus teros. Teros is a contrastive suffix, which means you're saying this versus something else. So and then what happens is that people invent these words because it makes sense to them at the time, and then people forget where these words come from and they just use it in a certain way. So quos plus teros gives us huatheros, which eventually becomes whether, then weather. So that's all the English forms. And we can go through the other ones a bit faster now because I put most of the detail in the English ones. So the German question words are was, wer, wo, wieso, wann, wie, welche. So the interesting thing about English is that English has maintained the w sound. So in English we've got why, when, which, whether. But in all the others it's become a v. So was, wer, wo, wieso, wann, wie, welche. So you can see all the old forms here. Was, wer, war, wann, wie. So you can still see the hu because the form in Proto-Germanic had the hu. Welche comes from willig, and that. So what you can see here is you can see they all come from the same proto-form. So English what comes from Proto-Germanic what, where comes from was, vor, comes from var, and that comes from war. So exactly the same as English, except why comes from wieso. So some of the languages do this, they come up with some kind of idiom and then that idiom just sticks. So you have wie plus so. So how so? So wie means how in German, so means so. So how so? Why? How so is that done? But now what's interesting about this is that if you look here, wie, so wann is the same as English when. It comes from the same form. Wie comes from wheel, geweel, however that's pronounced. That comes from Proto-Germanic hui. But if we look back here, if we look back, where is it? This one, why? That's hui, Proto-Germanic hui. So actually, v and y are what are called cognate. What that means is that they come from the same source. So it's very interesting to see when you find cognates, because you can see how words are developed in a different way. So for instance, the English word teach and the German word zeigen are both cognate. What that means is that both come from the same source in the proto-language. So teach comes from Old English teachien, which means to show or to demonstrate, and eventually that got the meaning of teaching in English. But in German, it retains a sense of showing, so that zeigen actually means to point out or to show something. And we got welche at the end, and it's exactly the same as English. Huilikas. Dutch, we got wat, wie, waar, waarom, wanneer, hoe, welke. And again, we got the same thing. We got what, that is was, waar. Again, here we've got another idiom. So we've got wanneer, comes from Old English, Old Dutch, van, and wanneer. So means before, and that also is something used in all the forms of English. Means before. And waarom is why, where, about, and that means why. So in German, why comes from Hause. In Dutch, it comes from where, about. Waarom, from Proto-Germanic, waar. And who comes from Old Dutch, hoe, and that's similar to which is what it is in English there. The only difference in Afrikaans, so Afrikaans is descended from Dutch. The only difference here is the very last one. So wat, wie, waar, hoekom, wanneer, hoekom, waarom, another Dutch word is, there's different ways of saying it. Hoekom, wanneer, but watter, that is not used in Dutch, but it developed in Afrikaans. Now here's some interesting things. So this is Swedish. Swedish is descended from Old Norse. So you can see here, what from what. So you can see that all the form, once you know a little bit about how these things develop, you can see that they're quite similar. So in Swedish it's vad, vem, var, varför, när, hur, vilken. So you can see vilken is exactly the same as English and German, huilikas. But again here we've got a kind of idiom here, or like a set phrase. Varför comes from where, for, and that actually is something that was still used in other forms of English. So in Shakespeare you've got wherefore art thou Romeo. It's got nothing to do with where, it's exactly what it means in Swedish. Why are you Romeo? Because it's talking about why is this person the way he is, why do things have to be like this. So she asks, wherefore art thou Romeo? And another change here is that när comes from almost när, and it comes from Proto-Germanic nechwas, which means near. So that's another kind of idiom. And I did look this up and I've failed to put it here. Hur comes from an older form in Swedish, huaru. Virken, again, the same as Proto-Germanic huilikas. And you can see the forms in Danish and Norwegian are very similar. Vad, vem, one interesting thing to note, them comes from the dative of var. So that means you're actually saying to what. So dative is things moving towards something. So if you're giving something to someone, that would be the dative. So comes from Old North them, and then that eventually became who in Swedish, and the other languages descended from Old Norse also do that. So them and them in Norwegian, and finally we have and Danish and Norwegian also do the same thing with när. So when is derived from this Old Norse word när, which means near. And finally, we have Icelandic what? So hvað, hver, hvar, af hverju, hvenær, hvenær, hvilken. So what's interesting about this is that we've got another idiom here, or two-word phrase, af hverju, which means of what. So af is related to English what, is related to English of, so of what, you can see there. And hverju is means what, but it's a certain it's a certain declension of what. So hverju comes from neuter dative declension of fair, and fair in Old Norse means every. So like and that's also where the Swedish word varje comes from. So fair and fair with another R, those were actually combined, and it led to this word hverju. All right, so that's about it for this video. I thought it was very interesting just looking at where these words come from. You can find some very, very interesting stories there, like how people came up with words for things, and how things developed, like the word which comes from Proto-Germanic what kind, and the word whether, and so things like that are what I find fascinating about language. If you have any questions for me about the questions about question words in the Germanic languages, you can just leave a comment on the post and I'll get to that. Thanks for watching.